Hey, I'm PriceEX. It's me. I'm Price. As you know, I'm Price can read. I am indeed M. Price. And M. Price can also review books that he's read. Currently, I am reviewing with Dog Price here. Hey, Dog Price. Say something, Dog Price. Dog Price currently has nothing to say. But I would like to say that I just, five minutes ago, about 5 minutes ago, finished The Dispossessed by Ursula K. LeGuin. And I thought I would share my thoughts with you regarding this book because I did make a video about The Left Hand of Darkness, also by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I thought at the time and still do believe is the greatest book I've ever read because Ursula K. Le Guin is a hell of an artist. And I bought several more of her books because I need to read them. I need to uh, try to absorb her greatness. Because this book was incredible as well, and I just want to give a little mini review of it. Quick summary of the book. Much like The Left Hand of Darkness, this is one of the Hainish novels. That meaning that there are these, it's like a science fiction sort of world. Centers around the Hainish people who are basically space explorers, have created this giant space system, and a lot of the novels seem to be about certain planets, certain cultures within the system. And this book in particular is about two planets. Um, well, a planet and a moon, I guess. Eurus is the planet, and they have a moon called Anares. And basically, the main relationship between the two is they all started on Eurus. They all started on this pretty plentiful planet, this very populated, crazy cool world. And there was this rebellion at one point, the Odonian Rebellion, led by Odo, or at least ideologically led. And essentially, it was an anarchist group that wanted to dismantle the governments, dismantle laws, dismantle capitalism, dismantle everything there that bound them basically to a set of rules. And they fled to the moon, to Anares. Well, not fled, but kind of traveled there. Were essentially expelled there. And Anares is this super dry, arid, barren moon of nothingness. And the people there have this, anarchy rules there, or doesn't rule. I guess you want to get into the nitty gritty of that. But there's people there, and for lack of a better terms, you could call it like a communist society, a society where no one owns anything, where everyone is equal. There's no real resources. Everyone's pretty much starving. Whatever they do have is basically like gruel and mush, and they kind of share that. And the way that work goes there is everyone has these job postings that they're basically forced to do, but not really forced to do because you can turn down any posting you get. Um, and everyone generally accepts the postings anyway because there's this culture of this collectivism where, oh, you have to just, you have to do it to take care of the community, to take care of that group. It's basically basically a giant commune of no one owns anything. Everyone is doing stuff for each other. Even the way that partnerships and romantic life is all based around, yeah, everyone pretty much lives in giant communal housing, and any kind of procreation is based upon the needs of the group, not actually, your individual family life or anything. It's a giant moon commune, okay? And the through line of the story is there's this physicist from Anares, from the moon, the commune moon, and he's basically this genius. And the story goes back and forth between either the past, where he's on Anares and living his life, and kind of you can see the trajectory of his, spiritual and mental mental health, essentially. And then half of it is on Eurus because the main plot of it is he is going to Eurus to sort of be an ambassador, to sort of find out what is really going on down there, as well as to share his ideas there, because for decades and decades and decades these two groups have not had any communication, any like physical communication between each other. There's been some like radio communication, but usually it's like heavily censored, heavily propagandized. um, these two groups have been isolated for pretty much as long as one can remember. um, and he's trying to essentially spread the new knowledge and new discoveries that he's made in physics, namely this technology that provides instant communication between anywhere. So, like, um, within this Hainish connection of all these other sci fi worlds, instead of having to wait, all this time to connect this planet and that planet, you can do it instantly. Knowledge would be immediate, communication would be immediate. You could eliminate all these issues that they've been having. Basically, this wonderful technology, and this technology that kind of upends a lot of rules and prior theories and um, prior orders of things. And as a result, that, or as a sort of point of conflict with this, a lot of the physicists on Anares, where this scientist, where the physicist is from, his name is Shevik, the main character, Shevik. Um, he kind of gets censored on his own planet because they don't want things to change, and they don't want. Um, they refer to the people on Eurus as like the profiteers, the people who are, they only want to make advancements for their own personal gain, for their own for money, for resources, for all of that, and they view that as distasteful. They view that as shameful, and they're very slow in their ways. They're very secluded in their ways, and Shevik kind of gets tossed around through his reflections on his past and his the half of the story that's about his life growing up on Anares. Basically, people don't like him because he's different and he wants to change, and he views his findings in science as a good thing that needs to be shared. And you'd think all these people who are, selfless and living in this crazy commune, they want to share their knowledge, right? Well, they don't, because they want things to remain as they are, and they don't want them getting abused and used for, like monetary evils. Um, so Shevik is kind of ostracized in a weird way on his planet. And then, as a sort of contrast to that, when he's in Eurus in the present day and when he's acknowledging or interacting with them, they also kind of view him as an outcast because he's this weird, essentially, they view him as an alien from this moon that was exiled, these people who were exiled many, many, many years ago, and they view him as this, this communist weirdo, and they don't want to interact with him unless they can essentially manipulate them for their own geopolitical system that's going on there. There's a bunch of warring nations on Eurus. One of the main things that the people of Anares don't like about Eurus is that there are wars, that there are conflicts, that it's all these nations fighting for the upper hand, essentially, on their planet. There's crazy amounts of wealth disparity, of quality of life disparity, and one of their prior suspicions about, oh, the people on Eurus would only just manipulate and use you, Shevik. They don't really care about you, kind of turns out to be correct, because a lot of them down there, they want Shevik's ideas and his technology, but they want to use it only for themselves so they can then take out the other powers on this planet. Um, so in a weird way, Shevik isn't really welcomed there himself as a person, as a scientist. They just want him for his ideas so they can steal them and use them to conquer the world, basically. As a result, then Shevik is very hesitant and very secretive and kind of running the political gambit when he's there to keep himself safe and to keep his ideas safe. And this novel is called The Dispossessed, right? And LeGuin does such a fantastic job of displaying this feeling of not really belonging anywhere, because it seems that no matter where Shevik goes, he doesn't really fit in. And that's not from the sense of like, oh, all the popular girls wear purple clothes and I'm a nerd girl. I wear the blue clothes, so I don't fit in. Not like the shallow like teen clickiness of fitting in, but such an in-depth world building perspective of Shevik does not have any sort of similar ideology to anyone who he interacts with. And it's about how he kind of goes through life, and whether in the present day on Eurus or in the past day on his home planet of Anares, and he totally doesn't belong anywhere. A great example of this is he's talking about like how he inherently doesn't fit on his own planet because when he's trying to get his scientific works published at this, the institutes of science at his home world, the professors there are trying to edit and um, basically propagandize his work for the greater good of, what they perceive to be the greater good of their community. And he fights back at it. He, eventually it galvanizes him into leaving altogether or trying to leave because he has such ownership over his ideas because he views them in the sort of the purity of the thing itself, and the idea that, well, I can't dilute my ideas because that's dishonest, that's not for the real greater good. And he has this sort of conflict within himself of like, how does he justify the supposed selflessness of his planet with the um, alleged, the profiteering or the egoization of himself. They always call the people on Eurus either profiteers or egoizers, or they use egoizer kind of as a slur, sort of like, oh, you think you're better than anyone else, you're an egoist, you're an egoizer. And to sort of conflate his actual altruism with trying to create something for the greater good, but then getting kind of screwed by his own people because they think that they have a different idea of the greater good, and they want to dilute his findings and his genius. And Shevik even comments in a weird way that like the entire system of their culture of supposed altruism, selflessness, this communal goal actually is its own set of chains, is its own set of authoritarianism. Because anytime you try to detract from that, yes, there's no police, there's no, agents, there's no physical force that comes down on you that prevents you from doing that. But there's a sort of cultural block, a sort of cultural jail cell he would find himself in, because the sort of communal idea is so rooted in their culture that anyone who doesn't totally acquiesce to that or totally follow that ends up getting ostracized, ends up getting isolated, and ends up essentially getting kicked out of the commune. And he talks about other people who, they're already starving on this planet. They're already totally lacking for resources, and people who don't want to essentially play that game get even further kicked out or even further starving. I forget what the term for these people were called, but there was an entire subculture of people who basically get forgotten because they don't fall in line with the community's main ideas. And that was this major hypocrisy that Shevik saw in that culture. But then, in a kind of on dog prices. Oh God, I can never actually. I'm getting a little camera stand for my phone so I can maybe have a consistency with how I film. But dog prices just having a little dream. Just gotta. Sometimes he has a little nightmare, I guess, and he gets all excited and pain, so it starts kind of whimpering. I gotta gently wake him up so he's okay. Um, oh my goodness. Anyway, what was I talking about? And Shevik sees these sort of contradictions in the people of Eurus's philosophy, in that um, they claim to be the people, the capitalists of, our society is great because we have, this power to change. We have rules. We have laws. We have wealth. We have all this stuff. But he finds that the people who are wealthy aren't really happy. He finds the people who are powerful are, crippled by anxiety and paranoia, and he finds all these contradictions in their society where they're not perfect either. And because there's so much violence in their society, because this whole world is fighting itself, essentially trying to find control, trying to manipulate Shevik into working for them to give them exclusively his technology, so they can conquer everybody else. Um, there's constant riots. There's constant uh, pain. Essentially, it's kind of like the chief Buddhist law, of desire is the root of all evil. Um, Shevik sees this world as also being horrible, and in a way also being lawless, much like his own world is purported to be, in the sense that because there's no there's no moral guide anywhere, everything has sort of fallen into this chaos and anarchy itself, and its own sort of sense of disorder, and that this isn't a world he'd want to live in either. So eventually um, he finds another ambassador, but one who's from Earth, not from Eurus, not, or I guess Terra they call it in this one. I assume Terra is Earth, and she kind of comments, like, hey, you think these planets are crazy? Well, at least on Eurus, their craziness results from an abundance of resources, and at least they're relatively new in the sense of they have a less storied history than my planet does. My planet, um, the sky is gray, the seas are black, everything is destroyed. The people who are here robbed and plundered and pillaged this planet, totally, you know, totally loss of all those resources. Kind of what's going to happen on our planet. Um, and they eventually left trying to find new worlds, and luckily the Hainish stepped in, and the Hainish discovered them, and the Hainish kind of gave them tips and helped to succeed and helped them settle and colonize other planets. And but we're still people on Terra, and they're still very uh, chaotic, and they almost have a different way that their minds are wired, in the sense that they've always lived on this barren world, and they're similar to Anares in that they have no resources. They have like no hope, and but also they're similar to Eurus in that they're from a culture of this failed capitalist society that plundered itself so much that there's nothing left. And he's able to find some kind of connection with her so that she's able to basically spread his technology and reveal his technology in a way that it doesn't just get used by one group or the other, but a way that it gets spread throughout, and that his original goals can be, fulfilled. Um, and this book, much like The Left Hand of Darkness, there's not a lot that's going on, say, like plot wise, in the sense of here's A, B, C, all going through breakneck speed. But it's just so grounded. Oh gosh, it's just so grounded and in depth with its world building, and it's so realistic in the sense that it's not just like a sci-fi world where everyone has a crazy name and does this and does that, and it just kind of seems convoluted in the sense that, oh yeah, it's just some author obviously making some world up. It feels like these two places like these two places are real places, and that this is like a real history from these worlds, and that these are believable cultures and believable ways in which they interact with each other. And for that, like, this author is just off the charts. you know I got two more books by her I'm excited to read. And Dog Price is excited to cuddle alongside me while reading them. And I just can't recommend these enough because they make you think, not in the sense of, oh, I'm just going to think while reading this book and, have the in the moment journey of just reading, but they make you think in the sense of how it applies to like real life now, or how, this book may have been written 50 years ago, but it's so prescient to today's world, as well as like reflective of the world decades and decades, maybe hundreds of years ago. And you can gain so much knowledge from it, and you can gain so much perspective of how there's so many contradictions in our own world, and so many things that don't fit in our own world, and so many people who are dispossessed, in our own world. And the sort of like the conclusion of this kind of ends up being that Shevik finds a way to sort of thread the needle between all these things, and to really care for himself in a way that is true to himself, and to try to take care of his family the best way he can, while also trying to stand up for his ideals and his knowledge and his goals for the world. And it ends with him going back to Anares, to his planet, and the last chapter is him just flying back on the ship to go home, and it ends right when they land. And there's one of the Hainish guys who is on the ship, and he's like, "Hey, can I land with you?" And the Shevik's like, "Well, you can, but it'd be really risky. There's a lot of people who are going to be waiting there, and I think a lot of them want to kill me actually, because I'm." He basically got away with being this huge cultural dissident, and he's coming back, and he's this hugely polarizing figure. And the guy's like, "Yeah, I still want to do it. I still want to, journeying is going to places you don't understand." And um, obviously, I can't describe it as well as Ursula LeGuin does, but the last little bit is he's thinking about his kind of wife. I say kind of because of their weird structures they have on Anaras, and his child, and thinking about how he wishes he had something to give his child, but he doesn't really have anything. And he's coming to Anaras the way that he left, with nothing in his hands. And it's interesting to think about that in the sense that, like, the entire time he had nothing to give anyone, in the sense of he had no strength, he had no power in the physical. It was all in the spiritual and the mental, and how the technology and the scientific truths that he stood up for, that he gave to the world, was like the greatest gift he could give. And there's this weird sort of there's this weird contradictory duality in the sense that he was selfless enough in the Anares way, that he wanted this technology to be everywhere, and he wanted this idea to be spread everywhere. But he was also kind of like Eurus, and selfish in the way that he wanted it to still be pure and undiluted and attributed to himself, because it's work that he stood up for his entire life, and it's work that he spread, and it's work that he wanted to be everywhere. And that these two ideologies that he grew up with, that he grew up surrounded by, that he grew up being ostracized by, that he grew up being persecuted by, ended up living within him at the same time, and ultimately contributed to his life and his legacy for his family and for everyone else. Um, Read the book, just read the book. Read all of her books, like I'm going to. She's just brilliant. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to talk about today. Um, how brilliant she is. When I bought this book at Barnes and Noble, because I originally read part of it from the library and wanted to get my own copy, the guy who I bought it from was like, "Oh, I used to live in Portland, and Ursula Le Guin and I lived in the same building." Okay, that's cool. Right? Fun. Did you ever see her? Did she think you were stalking her? Whatever. Just cute. Just cute. I wonder if people ever say that about me. It's like, "Oh shit, Anne Price, and we used to live in the same rundown building. We got both our cars broken into." you know. Whatever. It's goofy. It's just goofy. Anyway, I hope that you made it to the end of this video, or if you didn't, that you only stopped because you're going to go buy a copy of The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin. As always, Dog City never sleeps. I hope you have a good rest of your day. I hope that you have a dog price in your life too. Aw, dog price. All right, Dog City never sleeps. This is M Price. M Price can read. Bye.